Hello, hello, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity to reflect on the work of Zaha Hadid architects, the one in the past and the one in the future, in relation to the main theme of WAF 2025, that is the arts and mind. No matter what the scale of the intervention, whether a furniture piece or an airport or a building or a tower, the design that we are trying to push really merges the aesthetic innovation with purpose, resulting in design that embody meaningful beauty. The design are defined by a deeper pursuit of meaningful beauty where form, function, and cultural resonance converge. Meaningful beauty emerged from a deep commitment to the dynamic interplay between, for example, structure and environment. This philosophy goes beyond the visual appeal. It connects form, function, and emotion to create spaces that inspire, engage, and serve their surroundings. Context and meaning play a crucial role. The architecture seeks to resonate with this environment, whether the urban one or the natural one. And the design are often reinterpreting cultural narratives and local landscape, giving each project a unique sense of place. This sensitivity transforms beauty into something meaningful, an expression of identity and a dialogue between people and their surrounding. A central principle of the office design is that there is always a sense of motion. They reflect the flow of people, the light and the energy that you have by passing through the spaces. So the beauty emerges from this harmony between structure and movement, a design that feels alive because it responds to the human's experiencing. And the human experience is about designing spaces that evoke emotion, curiosity, are engaging exploration and interaction. Through light, scale, and form, the architecture engages both intellectually and sensorially. And meaningful beauty is, for us, a lived experience, not just a visual one. Now, today I'm going to explore the principles that guide meaningful beauty, and these are very much related to few key aspects. One is how the project sits within its location, from both how it touches the ground and the sky, how buildings are responding to an existing surrounding in terms of its environmental response, but also what is the relationship between old and new in some of the office projects. So the interpretation of the concept cannot start if not from the ground and finishes with the sky. So the entire topography, including the site and the building, they somehow become fluid, like a field. And this blur between field and architecture is very fundamental in our design. The form emerges within the field, and the field grows with the form itself. So the building is some sort of an eruptive moment in a larger topography and context, and an intensification, in a way, of a field. From peeling the ground to create a building volume to a car park design that becomes a three-dimensional envelope, the design is meaningful because it's working with the site. A new, stronger bond is created. The simple move of a curving ground from the external pavement that becomes the wall achieve quite a high significance in the way that people are experiencing the spaces in itself. And sometimes it's the lens that simply transform in some sort of a sculptural figure. So the context is both tangible and intangible diagram of all of the influences that are coming into the site. And kind of an energy field where push and pull are then creating the objects that are sitting within a larger landscape. And the landscape becomes the building, and the building grows from the landscape. Two identities that are very much merging into each other. And this fold continues, and on the inside, created an augmented connection between the walls, the floor, and the ceiling, with, in a way, no clear distinction between them, and that's so clear, so intuitive as a way of moving through the space. At the ground, in this case, slows gently up, and the volume of the building is carved out to create new pathways, new way of connecting a site that otherwise would be almost impermeable. And in the case of those 5 stations, they are very much an evolution of the same plastic form that adapts and reconfigures itself, whether it's sitting on the ground with the 2 stations at the bottom or on the top, or it has to adapt to the terrain on a quite deep slope. So a family of forms that mutate with the terrain. And in this case, the terrain, the views, and the navigation through the building were the guiding principle to embed into nature the design in itself. Sometimes it is the building that design or redefine the boundary of the water, but then the water comes back in the building form with the ripples on the facade. Other time, the volume melts within the site, and this creates new opportunity of connecting a quite fragmented campus. This is in Hong Kong, and this connection then evolves through the big atrium in the middle of the building. The form that is influenced by local tradition, like the courtier, but in this case reject completely the idea of podium and tower on top, fusing everything so that the flow of people and the facade have all a very strong sense and meaning in relation to each other. And experimenting with the variation of how the building touches the ground and how it connects to the sky is creating this diversity and familiarity to create kind of a more human experience in a forest of tower. So how do you break the scale of a super tall building? In this case, we looked at lifting up the buzzing street life with programs and landscape and creating a new form of commission between the tall buildings and this podium at the lower side. And this idea of the humanizing the scale of the building also gets in the center of the design with internal landscape that permeates the space and allows for new form of interaction. This project is all about stitching back the city. So here the form, the massing, and the facade of the building are meaningful because are very much related to this location. The first, we were called to reimagine a new modern plaza in contrast with, or in contrast, in play with the existing plaza, but also to stitch together 2 parts of the city that were completely cut off by a big railway. So the project starts reimagining each one of the facade of the building, including the roof element, as a space that engage much more with the city than not all of the other plots around were doing. So the main east facade the facade goes from the vertical fins that are dripping into the side, creating a moment of how in the master plan. But then the same fins are turning horizontally a bit to evoke the railway station that is just next to it. So the building presents different facades in different locations, each one trying to break the monotony of the old mass and very much working with environmental and site conditions. The 1000 Museum in Miami, I couldn't have done a presentation without this project here. It's, for me, a really striking example of how form, structure, and interior layout can be seamlessly integrated into a unified architectural structure. So the building exoskeleton defines its appearance while also serving as the main structural support for the building. The idea here is not to hide the support of the the building, but are very much expressing it fluidly on the facade. And the way the exoskeleton open and close is actually in relation to the actual subdivision of the apartment inside. So again, the idea here is that the inside of the apartment layout are reflecting also this fluidity and openness, and the absence of any structural then internal support allows for a full expression of this open plan apartment layouts. So the circulation and the spatial flow are carefully choreographed in a kind of mirror of the organic geometry of the facade. In other cases, the structure becomes not only the main definition of the external, but also how this extremely tall atrium is designed. Or the structure and the people flow are the way that systematically the project took shape. And the structure is instead, in this case, really very much creates some form of three-dimensional order that makes the navigation through a multi-layer station much easier. And again, another example of how the structure can create order in a complex aggregation of program. The roof structure here mutates scale to embed different programs within it, and without, in a way, ever losing the integrity of its structural performances. And the fluid form of the center of the exhibition space, that is this airplane, is actually used to create a minimal surface that, in a way, define the overall space, but also guide the visitors into the different components of the mathematical gallery. And another example where structure is incredibly embedded in the design from the beginning is Morpheus' City of Dreams. When we were called in, there was already an existing podium with 4 towers, all operating, and we had to give a design that was, in a way, allowing for a multitude of programs within it. The design there started with an evolution from two-dimensional phases of the facade into a three-dimensional one. So again, the programming was quite complex, an existing podium, and the idea was, how do we create and generate more facade into these extruded blocks without compromising on the view out that was already existing. So in a single extrusion that is carved out into voids, and those voids are then the one that are creating the continuity of the structural system. Again, this is typhoon area and a very high seismic. The core, the exoskeleton prone to it, the facade, is actually then connected internally with the main cores to create the overall structure. This allows for magnificent atrium to appear at the ground floor, views throughout the entire building from the lobby up through the void. And finally, this is where the building really comes alive. So as people are moving into the building through the panoramic lifts, they have the opportunity to experience this building from bottom up all the way to the swimming pool. And another interesting thing about is that everything that is designed here is part of a family, like the restaurant, like the way the lights permeates from a bottom up into the space. It's very much all about the micro and macro attention. So from the design of the exoskeleton to the macro windows to all of the details of the inside, each one are reconductible to a family of whether quads or triangles. And this makes the journey at the same time very easy to understand and quite simple to understand. And full parametric tools were used to design and to fabricate. The time spent on the preparation of both the parameters and the function were allowing clients, designers, engineers to really come up with alternative solutions very quickly. So this is, I need to speed up a bit, but this is one of the videos that shows how from the setup of our design, we were able to then work all the way to the fabrication of the structural member of the components of the facade. And sometimes the design are very much created with an idea of responding to climate conditions. They could be very harsh. I'm presenting a couple of those projects. This is the Central Bank of Iraq, where the form embeds all of the principles of the environment that it sits in. So there is a concrete exoskeleton that responds to different orientations, so opens and closes. And this opening and closing are related to the response to the harsh sun within the site. But at the same time, there is a beautiful panorama from this tower. So the waving across of the exoskeleton allows for this view from the office building. The design, in this case, very much emphasized the idea of sustainability and efficiency. So here, the orientation, the shading system, and the material choices are all designed to reduce the heat and the energy consumption. So together, those principles very much create a structure that follows the environmental intelligence gathered from the site. And I'm going to skip this one. And essentially, we looked at all of the site conditions to capture with the cell of the building the predominant wind, and at the same time creating self-shading capsule that can work together. By aggregating them together, giving them scale, some small, some big, and varying the height of the cells in itself, a design that is purely responding to the environmental condition was created. As you can see, the wind is captured in the courtyard, making it lively, and the structure is creating this kind of self-shading device for the atrium itself. The result is a livable space in the middle of the courtyard and quite an open facade in the corridor that overlooks into it. In some cases, the cells are covered, and again, the skylight that is at the top is self-shaded from the structure. Sometimes the cells become a beautiful canopy, or they close itself to create a prayer room. And again, the importance of filtered light to create this spiritual connection with the spaces. And this is the build project as it stands right now. It's a research center with offices, and it's a city in the city where everything is connected, everything goes back to the same cell, but each cell is modified to adapt to the different condition that is put in. There is an important thing to do that we are all called nowadays to respond, is this linking between all the new designs. So this is the Serpentine Gallery. I think it's a way of very much redefining the relationship between old and new. And while we preserve the historical fabric that was a gunpowder building, we have also redesigned this a fluid tensile structure that hovers on the building, the existing building. So the interplay here is this lightweight, futuristic structure and the solidity of the gunpowder building. Other time, we had a completely visionary approach to old and new. We were called here, I call this the respectful tension between an old and new building. And in this case, we have proposed a building on top of the derelict fire station as a way to respond to the needs of the office spaces workers. And the idea of articulating the facade with panels that are sometimes opaque, sometimes transparent, is a way to not only respond to the environment, but also create this effect from far away and close up that very much define the way the building sits on the facade
8 years
itself.
ago, they decided to build this new building, and then they drew up a plan in how do we want to work here. And there were words like collaboration, working together, transparency, moving, etc. And that's what we try to do in this building. People are very proud to work in our new port house. I'm convinced that people talk more, work together in a better way. You don't have to sit all day at the same desk. You can move, and teams sit together in the same open space, so they see each other, they meet each other, which is better for cooperation, for collaboration, and to solve problems. You need innovation, and this building and this way of work enables to be innovative. I think it has to be the future of work, yeah. It's architecture and technology together.
And I couldn't go away without talking a little bit about how the Maxi Museum in Rome is actually another way of looking at how sensibly inserting a mass of the building within the building. This is located in historically a residential compound in Rome where there were industrial building and quite poor housing blocks. And the museum have actually work with the mass of the existing or neighboring building, but has decided to wave them and turn them into the space. And this design, in a way, really rejects the idea of a single isolated object. It's in reality creating new way, new intersection between the city and the museum in itself. And this doesn't happen only on the outside with the main movement, but this happens in the gallery space with the light flowing from the top, in the way people will circulate the space and really travel and discover the exhibition spaces. And again, some of the old moves of peeling from a surface are reappearing again in this museum, and they are very much part of the overall design. Maybe a less well-known project, this one. This is the contemporary reinterpretation of Rome architectural legacy. The design is actually drawing the form from a city that is very layered, Rome, where in this case is very much a stratification of Baroque, Renaissance, and Roman geometry. So the idea here is that we work with vaults and arches and very rich material palette to define the new identity for this hotel. And the hotel is in Palazzo Capponi, an historical palace, and it's very important culturally in its own setting. It occupies 5th floor, and our design very much respond to this. We started with these vaults as the central movement that unifies all of the interior designs. So those are inspired by the Roman architecture, but they are creating this transformation and evolution throughout the spaces. For example, they become some sort of a threshold from in and out with lighting feature in the main spaces of the entrance, or in the lobby they become ephemeral just to come back just next to it with a very strong materiality of handmade brass tile, which give at the same time a warm and luxurious feel to the space. And he continues with, this is a Michelin star restaurant, and again, different materials, but again, working with this idea of vaulted ceiling spaces, forms that are really warm, immersive, creating new connection. And again, another use as a lighting feature in one of the restaurants, or they become some soft element in the ceiling and the wall of the gym. And it continues throughout the building, arriving to the peak where we had to confront ourselves with frescoes on the facade and a very rich ceiling. And here, each one of the elements is designed with an idea as an homage. The materiality is very much an homage to the marbles, to the woods, and to the different material already present, but yet is re-elaborated with a totally contemporary touch and feels. Each room is different in this hotel. Each room is defined by existing facilities, but also sometimes has opportunity of working also with exterior spaces. Now I'm coming to a conclusion. this is us now. You all know that we were founded by Zaha Hadid, the Dame Zaha Hadid. I think the office is still what it was years ago with her. That she really created an office where, you know, the ideas are flowing, the ideas are criticized heavily, where the experimentation is part of our daily life, and moreover, there is passion. What do we do? What I showed today is an excursus in between old and more recent projects, more to come. This goes through a lot of the work that we do in kind of optimizing and finding solutions that are, for example, responding to the environment. They are creating designs that are millimetrically calibrated to their location, to the way that they get platinum or gold certification for all of the environmental aspect. And these buildings, again, are designed right at the beginning of our process of design that have in mind a response to some specific condition. And again, this is an example of how timber can be used on the big scale of a stadium. In other cases, the insight and analytics are used to define the best position for a core or how to respond in a way to the daylight condition in the building. Again, those are not tools that we use at the end to demonstrate that we have done our homework. We have a team that work alongside at every competition, at every stage of the design, and we work in parallel with them, not against each other. The design, therefore, are, again, meaningful because the tools that we use are actually helping us to find not the best of the best solution, because that's utopian, but something that is very much respecting the condition that we set together with client, together with our engineers, to make the design a meaningful one. So again, informed innovation goes about every scale. Informed information goes at the scale, for example, of products, of objects, of enhanced fabrication. We use informed innovation to investigate new forms or new objects. So for me, again, meaningful beauty is very much rooted in intelligence, innovation, experience, location, structure, environment. So to more beautiful and meaningful projects. Thank you. What if it's a bit too much?
Goodness me. Well,
can I confess that I had 45 minutes, so a little bit.
No, you did very well. It was kind of a marathon. I remember that Zaha's lectures were quite long.
Yeah.
And she had this thing that she wanted to show every project she'd ever done. And within her lifetime, it was certainly true that there were a lot of projects, because, you know, if you include all the ones from the early apartments and from the monsoon bar in Japan, and which is kind of when she and I were both working in Japan, it's a lot of work. And so to see you show, and I guess this is just a part of what is being produced by the office, it's a phenomenal amount of work. And sometimes it gets a bit repetitive. You know, we've seen certain things, which leads me, you know, you explained that there is a kind of vocabulary, and I'm taken back to Zaha's way of explaining the work. She would not explain those concepts in depth, but say, this is working with the notion of the fold, or this is working with the notion of the curve, or whatever it would be. So I can hear Zaha coming through in what you say, because you helpfully enabled us to kind of understand that there are certain maneuvers that are undertaken to set about resolving, presumably, a complicated brief that you've been asked to realize. So my first question really is about this vocabulary and how far you stick to it, and how is it that you can break out of that? And I know there's this idea of continual experiment, but does that mean that you're allowed to kind of come up with new strategies that Zaha didn't know about or hadn't thought about?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. I think it's a very valid one, and the one that maybe we ask to ourselves as designer every year. I think in our case, maybe it's felt like more a stringent question to ask, but isn't it something that every architect in this room is asking to itself? Do I preserve an idea of design, so some sort of continuum in the design, or I break the rule? I only can say that from what you have seen today, and I've shown a part of the office work, you are saying that there is something that traces back, but I compared also to many other of our competitors, the projects are very unique. I mean, you will never see the same Miami Tower copied again in Guangzhou, as well as you will not see Baku again. But some of the forms, I call it vocabulary, might reappear somewhere else. This is, I think, an important thing. I mean, every time you do a project, there is an idea that then becomes crystallized into the final form of the build project. But out of that final outcome, you cannot imagine how many we had, discarded. But maybe some of those, they stay with you longer, they linger, and they reappear in another project. So I think it's important to look at every project with in mind the solution that project, that client, that program, that site is calling you to do. But I don't think there is always the perfect and only answer to every specific call. So what I'm trying to say is that there is a retroactive progress that we do when we design, and I don't think it would be sane for us to always start from tabula rasa. But every project, I think, brings a new, quite a fresh take on something that we might have done, or Zaha might have done without us many years before.
Well, I seeing this rapid journey through many years of work, some of which you've been involved in directly and been in charge of, and some of which is the inheritance of the office. But it seems to me that there are kind of maneuvers in space. There is this common sense of movement, which is one of the things that Zaha was driven by, is an anti-gravity, a sense of lifting and motion, and almost a kind of solidified choreography that would encourage new sensations of moving through buildings. Would it be unfair to say that they seem to divide into buildings which elaborate the ground by kind of making multiple grounds and then exploring the level continuous surfaces which join different horizontal planes, and there are those that are vertical. So kind of the vertical ones are like plants. They grow like trees out of the ground, and they kind of have a stability, often just like trees, they kind of grow out into the ground to sort of stabilize them and in a sense colonize the ground around, but nevertheless vertical in principle, in driving force. And there are those others which are kind of, as I said, they're sort of ground related and horizontal. And I think that Zaha preferred the ground related ones.
Look, The project that we are doing are still looking at both of those conditions very much, but when it comes to tall buildings, and I'm particularly passionate about tall buildings as well, is the idea that each one of the building has a very strong definition of how it lands on the ground and how it's creating the new skylight. I mean, this is another ephemeral condition, but is the one that in every city that has tall building is the one that is more recognizable of the silhouette of a city. Now, it's true what you are saying, that the towers, they resemble somehow in our design very much some sort of a tree that grows, and the fact that the structure very much follows the function inside, but also it's very true to himself, starts really massive at the base to become really thin and ephemeral on the top, on the coloration of the building, is very true. I think as far as the condition is analyzed, whether on an horizontal building that blends with the landscape or in a tower, whether there is a lot of attention to the, people passing by all the way to the top of the building, I think our job is done properly. A lot of times, the design of towers are only meant to be seen from far away, and therefore the famous skylight, without giving enough attention on how people will move, or how people will approach the tower in itself. And this is where a lot of failures on ground condition and in tall building city is then affecting the life of everyone.
Well, it is true that in New York, say in Manhattan, that most people experience towers from either in the mass, if you see Manhattan when you come from JFK Airport, you see it on the horizon and it's a massive tower, and you can't really distinguish one from the other. They're just lots of towers. And when you get into the city, you tend to take in the lower level because they've been built on specific plots that can't spread out like the roots of a tree underground. They're defined by the pavement, and usually they have to go right up to the edge. So that's...
And I get it, but I think one of the elements that I don't think you will ever see in our design is that you don't have anything, the lower floors, say, commercial spaces, have no relationship with what the tower is doing at the top. So I think the idea, refusing the idea of podium and tower as two entities, that I can do a arched facade at the bottom and then a skyscraper all in glass, will never happen for us, because effectively the towers, they're starting from the ground, but they need to have their own integrity as they grow up in the sky.
The ground part is very important.
It's very important.
So what were you, if you were commissioned to do a tower in Manhattan and
okay, now Manhattan has its own regulation, but I think what we will force the tower and the podium to do is to break this, maybe horizontality of the podium and verticality of the tower. The two will flow into each other. And again, this is because I truly believe that these kind of collages of elements in the city are not helping how people see, perceive, flow into the building. I mean, a lot of the project that I show you, when we are lucky enough to do both the exterior and the interior, the two things are never separated. What is the appearance outside of the tower reappears inside. And this is the same relationship that the tower should have with the city, with this regional and global location intelligence. No, it cannot be separated by that.
So sometimes the context, the urban context, you can't control it perhaps as much as you would like, and that it seems to me very exciting to see some of the later things, and you chose a whole section of your talk which was to do with the juxtaposition of new structures together with old ones. And I think these give an incredibly promising synthesis of the kind of Hadid-esque anti-gravitational space, and how it can grow out of or coexist with existing structures. Certainly in European cities, we expect many buildings that exist in the city to stay there forever. They are kind of historic entities, and people, generally speaking, don't want them simply to be swept away and a new quarter. So does it mean that your adaptation or addition to existing buildings is a relatively new venture in the office?
I think it's this idea of working with existing building is for sure a challenge for us, and therefore challenge taken. I think whichever of that, we have more projects now coming into completion that are looking at existing building, addition or even working within an existing building. And every time I find it like it's a new, the challenges makes us, ruminate again and again on what we can and what we cannot do. I mean, that's why I showed the Rome hotel. It's clear that this building had its own history to be to preserve, but at the same time, we didn't just want to create a space that was, giving a facelift into it. We wanted the contemporary design to be quite a strong element, to work sometimes in balance, sometimes respectful, but sometimes taking over. Because I think building when looking at all the new, and it's also the theme of my unit at the Architectural Association, is never about one that wins over the other. It's not the history that should dictate everything within the redesign, but it's very much a conversation between the two, where they should have same power.
And you want the visitor to the hotel or Maxi or the Antwerp office. In each of those, it's up to the visitor to somehow synthesize their reading of the city, to include it springs from what they know and takes them into some other dimension of perhaps what they don't know.
Correct.
But the fact that, if you're going to be sleeping in a diagonal bed with kind of all flowing, all of that, but you've got kind of figurative as
frescoes,
well as historic frescoes on the walls, that's quite a kind of match for you.
But I think in essence there was really looking at the language of the building and in its context, as I was trying to explain. A lot of the design derives from a modification of a vault system that adapts in different conditions, and is very true to each of the rooms, and yet changes dramatically. So I think those are the kind of experimentation that we are
and hopefully people will continue to want to be subjected to those experiments. And we'll embrace them with pleasure. One final question: why are so many projects white?
Yes, good question. You should have asked this to Zaha. You would have fly off the wing. No, it's a good question. And I think historically we have done a lot of white buildings, but we are growing out of black and white. I show a couple where finally you get to see some colors. Look, I think this the sensitivity about color is an extremely complex one. I think maybe it's an area where I'm saying it to myself and generally to the office, where we need to learn more.
Well, Foster and Rogers would be on the same side with colour. because they used to do wild colours in the 60s and 70s, and then they all went white.
And they all went white. It's not easy to work with color, and I think it's more a lack of courage from our side to switch to something that is not black and white, more to be seen. Thank you very much, Nigel.
Well, thank you, Viviana. It's been fascinating hearing about your take on Zaha Hadid architects. Thank you so much.
Thanks again.